Matteo, it's so lovely to see you. And
it's great to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I have to say, I've seen the animation, and obviously, and Anthony and I were watching it today, and I've just said to Anthony, "You are a genius." I mean,
you're
seriously.
far too kind. Thank you so much.
But it's such an enchanting story. The animation and illustration is so. There's a simplicity, but it's so creative, and you just have this finesse, Matteo, and you're just an amazing storyteller. And so I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you about it today. But I mean, every story has to have a beginning. And what was the kind of fruition of this for you, really?
Oh, the beginning of this story is quite interesting. First of all, I've been asking myself, I've been toying with the idea for quite a long time, whether I could actually create a cinematic product entirely on my own. And this is an idea that I've been having for a few years. And I think that all of us filmmakers do understand what I'm about to say, which is, sometimes you develop projects which take a long, long time, some dream projects, they never come to fruition, and you start wondering, is there any alternative way to the official ones to actually make something happen? And of course, cinema, as we all know, is a collective effort. So I'm not diminishing it in any way, but I was actually wondering whether it would be possible or not. And I spent a few years, again, as I said, toying with this idea. It never came to fruition, but in the end, I know it sounds terrible, but the pandemic and the lockdown of 2020 actually gave me the chance to focus on this idea and try to come up with something that was tangible. And so my series was born out of that. I was in Italy. I'm from northern Italy, from Turin specifically. And as you know, when COVID first hit in Europe, it hit northern Italy especially really, really badly. So we were in a very severe lockdown. And as I was literally confined to my own house, I started thinking of this idea again. And mind it was a very technical idea. I mean, I started thinking, what could I do? Because I was actually developing at the time personal projects that were they were meant to be classically done, which is with a crew made of people in flesh and blood, with a cast made of actual people in flesh and blood. So I had to forget all of that. And at the time, I had no idea when I could have started working on some personal projects again, or, even commercial projects as a director. At the time, at the beginning, we really didn't know what would have happened in the next few months, let alone, weeks or even years. And at that point, I started thinking what I could do. And since I'm an illustrator, but not an animator, I thought, maybe I should start developing something. And it's true, I didn't know how long this lockdown would have lasted, but I knew that it would have taken me ages to learn the glorious craft of animation. And I don't want to say to sound too lazy, but I thought, what I would really like to do is to create a project with a beginning and an end. I want to see the end, not too quickly, but I want to see an end anyway. And I thought I cannot start, studying classic animation because it would take me far too long. And out of those thoughts, the idea of this very peculiar style that I had to come up with, that I had to invent, actually came about because I had to create a style of my own that allowed me to actually develop a series. And that's how it came into being. I first developed, while in lockdown, the style. And as I was doing it, the interesting thing it was quite a metaphysical thing, because I started drawing this little wizard that I had already drawn a year earlier while I was in LA. While I was in LA and doing some sketches, I drew this little wizard, and somehow this illustration stayed with me. So when I came up with the technical stylistic idea, I decided to go back to this character. And so I started drawing him with many different expressions, and I started cutting him out. But then I still didn't have a story. And that frustrated me a little because yes, I thought, wow, I now have the style, I now have the character, but I must find a story. And at that point, I remember that I had bought in a secondhand bookshop a collection of stories titled Hexengeschichten, which is the German title for witch tales, by this German author named Ludwig Bechstein. And he was a contemporary of the Brothers Grimm. So he lived in Germany at the beginning of the 19th century. And at the time, while he was living, his collections of fairy tales, because just like the Brothers Grimm, he was a folklorist, a proto-anthropologist, we might say, and a collector of fairy tales. And why, during his lifetime, his collections of fairy tales were even more famous than the ones by the Brothers Grimm, believe it or not. And he's still quite famous in Germany, but pretty much everywhere else, most people, unless they're scholars or fairy tale experts, most people don't remember him. And this specific collection, even among, from what I understood, even among his
contemporaries,
not just his contemporaries, but also his scholars, is not particularly well known or well studied. And what he did with this collection was finding some papers about witch trials in 17th century Southern Germany, Bavaria specifically, took them and then re-elaborated them into fairy tales or Gothic narratives. And as I got this book, I couldn't believe my luck, because I had already, as I told you, I had already drawn the character, and I found this short story whose original title was The Little Pitchfork Rider, which I later turned into The Little Broomstick Rider. And yes, I read this story and I couldn't believe my luck. Actually, I'm still very surprised that this story is not part of famous anthologies, because it's so brilliant. It's so genius. It's so political in its wit and evil satire, that it really is a little gem, a little masterpiece on its own, but completely, not necessarily forgotten, but completely unknown. And I felt so lucky. And at that point, the idea of a series came about, because the story is about, well, let's say what the story is, first of all. The story is about a little boy of 9 being accused and then tried for witchcraft in 1620s Bavaria by a group of inquisitors. And the story, I mean, the premises are tragic, of course, but the story is very comedic and lively. Even the original short story that I decided to adapt. But the idea of making it into a series was because within the narrative, the trial actually happens through a few days. And that gave me the idea of making something episodic. And at the same point, up to this day as a director, I've been doing pretty much everything: short films, documentaries, music videos, and commercials, but not series. And this idea really intrigued me. So I decided to go with it, and that's how it came into being. Sorry for being so long.
No, that's fine. But it's interesting by having it episodic, and obviously it's animation, so it needs to kind of be short as well. So I imagine you need to be, with regards to the storytelling, you need to be quite succinct and get to the point far quicker, but also be able to create these characters that are instantly going to grab people's attention and want to go on this ride with. So with regards to actually the storytelling, was that kind of foremost in your mind, that you had to be, I suppose, economic, but have enough oomph to be able to tell that story properly in an episodic way? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, it has also been a real learning curve for me as a director, because up to now I've been doing mostly live action. So when you work as a live action director, you are, of course, creating sometimes from nothing, but you use things and people that do already exist. You choose a location, you might even transform it, but that location already exists. You choose actors that you think are the best people to portray your characters, but these people already exist. In this case specifically, speaking also of the economy of the process, I had to have very clear in my mind that whatever I was coming up with, I had to create from scratch, which means I had to illustrate it and then cut it out and then move it around like a puppet. So all of that was a great learning curve for me, because also especially in terms of compositing, I had to come up with the idea of the frame composition and then actually create every single element. And I have to say that as a director, that was, again, a great learning experience. I know that this is probably, actually, this is certainly the normal daily occupation of people dealing with animation, but for me it was a completely new thing, and being entirely on my own was of course yet another challenge. I had some very, very precious help from my wonderful dad, who helped me just with the engineering of the set design. We have a clear example right behind me right now, the village of Masbach, which plays a role in the story, and which I entirely drew on my own and cut it. But then I need someone with a better understanding of the engineering, or making all of this stuff stand up decently, following my indications. And my dad who's a great creative, was very, very helpful at this. So yeah, that was it. But speaking also of the adaptation, I don't know if I understood what you asked me, but I don't know if I answered entirely. But speaking of the literary adaptation, that was an interesting thing. I had already worked on literary adaptation before. I did a work of mine, which is one of my personal favorites, about Peter Pan. So in that case, I had already been dealing with the criticism, let's say, of adapting a literary piece, especially a great classic such as that one. In this case, there was less pressure, maybe, because of course the text was in a way unknown, but some parts of it were brilliant as they were. So also in terms of the dialogue and the quick, the quick chat back and forth between the characters. Sometimes I adapted quite literally from the fairy tale. Sorry, no, it's not really a fairy tale. It's a short story, from a witchy short story. But in other instances, I reinvented it completely. No spoiler alert, but episode 4, for example, is a creation of mine. We experience somehow witch's Sabbath, which in a way is described in the short story. But I decided to give it a completely different frame and therefore a completely different narrative twist, which is entirely of my own in terms of creation. And also the ending of my series is very, very different from the original ending, which was brilliant, nice, and cute. But I thought, no, this story deserves another ending. And there I went.
Actually, obviously I don't want to give too much away or any spoilers, but the kind of that kind of arc of the story and the what would you say, that the social commentary and the it's hard to say because I don't want to give anything away, but the when we get to the end of the animation and the point that you're trying to make with it is really, really, really clever. And
thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think it will make people think for sure. It holds a mirror up, doesn't it, to the people who are the inquisitors.
Yes,
say?
And by the way, thank you so much for saying that and pointing that out, because the social commentary is something that really interested me. Of course, this story had all the elements and details that always interested me as a filmmaker. I love dealing with the fairy tale for adults kind of genre, with fantasy and fantastic elements, but always with a depth. And in this case, what this story really gave me was a profound political meaning, and also a great social commentary, which interestingly, as well as tragically, does not pertain to a specific historic frame, because of course the story is set in the 1620s in Bavaria during the 30 Years' War, which, as we know, was devastating for the area. And not only that, it was devastating for Central Europe. But yes, witch hunts are real, and tragically they have to deal with any historic period, and the dynamics tragically are pretty much the same anytime. So seeing them at play in such a clever way in the original story was a real gift for me, because then of course I readapted them. I sometimes changed them, reinvented them, but I was starting from a very solid base indeed.
Absolutely, definitely. And with regards to the kind of animation, when I was watching it, and the illustration, it was when I was a little girl, I'd have these like cut out like books where you would hang clothes on the cutout. So you cut out the dress,
or like paper dolls, basically.
Yeah. And then you would dress them, and looking, and your animation really reminded me of that, because there's this kind of real sort of 3-dimensional aesthetic to the film.
Yes.
And can you talk about your use of layering and how that helped give sort of depth to what you were creating?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I came up with the style, this style actually was informed by some of my personal loves, and one of them was certainly paper toy theaters from the 18th, 19th century. There's plenty of them. They're great. I personally don't own the historic ones, but I do own some reproductions, and they're wonderful. So when I decided to come up with the style, that idea was already in my mind, because I love that style so much, and I decided to reproduce it with my series. So of course the layers are, of course, the different layers of these three-dimensional paper toy theaters that give a rather magical idea of perspective, you know. So of course that was it. That was one of my main references. And yet another main reference that I have, which also respond to a great love of mine, is silent cinema. When I was in film school with Anthony, I was very, very glad, because in film school they had us tell our short films as directors without any form of dialogue or sound. So we really had to force ourselves to create narratives that were exclusively visual. And I think that is pivotal in the formation of a filmmaker. I think dialogue is important, is very important. There's great directors who are great film directors who are mostly based on the brilliance of the dialogues, and there's nothing wrong about it. But the true essence of cinema is narration through moving images. Yes. And that should never be forgotten. And so when I was, again, developing this style, again, silent cinema was for me a great and pivotal reference. Also because I thought, I'm not going to really invest that much money, so I'm probably not going to have money to pay some actors. And I know some great actors would have loved to collaborate, but I knew I couldn't pay them. So I had to come up with another idea to show the dialogue, because this series, being set during a trial, as you can imagine, is quite verbose. So verbose or verbose, I don't know how you say it. Sorry,
verbose,
yeah, thank you. But you got it. But the thing is, it was so I had to come up with an idea how to show dialogues. And so I did it with title cards, which of course are also very, very typical of silent cinema.
It really works. And the other thing that really, really works is the humor that is infused throughout the film. How important is humor to you in your storytelling?
Oh, humor is fundamental to me. I love humor, especially sort of wicked, evil humor. I really, really love it. And I've already used it tons of times in my works, starting from my music video for Moby. Oh yeah, set in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s porn industry. But it was quite tongue-in-cheek and very humorous. But also I did other works where it was very present, like this viral I did years ago on Halloween called Treated, or a silent short film, a silent musical short film that I made called Music Lovers, or even a spoof of vampire films called Vampire Compendium and starring Una Chaplin, of Game of Thrones fame and many other things. She's amazing. But yeah, so I've always used humor a lot, also as a way to subvert genre, which is another thing that I like doing very, very much. Some other times I also like to experiment with other ways of telling, and my Peter Pan film, for example, is very dramatic. And it's the first cinematic adaptation of the original ending of the story as originally conceived by its author, which is far more dramatic, if not tragic, than what we're used to know as the Peter Pan fairy tale. In this case, I went back to my original roots as a defender of wicked humor. And this, when I read the story, I thought, oh, this is mine. This is certainly mine. But I like very much as a director to be able to deal with different registers. I love it, even within the same story. Sometimes I'm developing some further projects, one feature in particular, where you actually have several layers and very, very different situations, from humorous to thrilling to poetic to mysteric. So I really like within a single story to be able to tell it all. Or as in this case, to tell through humor some very, very serious, deeply disturbing elements. And let's not forget this story. I think one of the great aspects of the original story, The Little Pitchfork Rider, that I adapted into my series, The Little Broomstick Rider, is that this story, this narrative is really shrouded in ambiguity, because I think that the audience will choose very easily a side within this narrative. They will be very quick at deciding who is the good one and who is the evil one or ones. But then after the series has ended, I think people might find some aspects quite thought-provoking and reflect on whether there was actually a juxtaposition between good and evil, or whether it was just two different forms of evil battling against each other.
The paradox.
You know? Yeah. Which I found very, very interesting, because from a moral standpoint, this story is very wicked and very anarchic, even though it doesn't seem. So, yeah.
Yes, you're right. Actually, it really is. And because it's, a little boy as well. I mean, he's charming, and there's an innocence about him, but he's almost kind of like a puppet master in some respects, because he's controlling them as much as they're just trying to control him. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And let's not give too much away, but yeah, he is certainly cute.
Yes.
And adorable, and as a character. And then I tried, of course, when I was drawing him, when I was creating him, all those characteristics were already in place. But he sounds very innocent and naive, and he probably is. I think he is at some level. Yeah. At some other level is something very different.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's three-dimensional in more ways.
Exactly. A very two-dimensional character.
Yes. Yeah.
But a three-dimensional figure, definitely, yes.
Absolutely. And the other thing, the other kind of character really within the film, and I know something that's very important to you, is music and your use of score. And it's just so tonally, fitting, which obviously I would expect from you. But can you tell us a little bit more about the choice and why that choice of music was so important for you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I do have a musical background, which started pretty early on, because when I was a child, I used to sing in a children's choir, and we used to sing in operas. So I was introduced at a very young age to this fantastic world. And I've always loved opera. And I got my master's degree in musicology and history of music with a great Italian musicologist, Professor Giorgio Pestelli. And my MA final thesis was about Mozart operatic works translated into film. So I actually analyzed how the musical score got translated visually on film. So this musical element for me is fundamental. Of course, classical music has always played a huge role in my life, more than any other genre of music, although I listen to pretty much everything. But if I have to say that I'm a bit of an expert, is certainly the classical music repertoire, so to speak. And that's my background. And then, of course, music is fundamental to me as a director. I'm very sensible to this element. And I think that a good director also can be recognized by the music that he or she decides to put into their work. Because I do think that music in a cinematic project needs to fulfill two very important dimensions. One is the emotional one. Basically, you choose a score or a piece that is emotionally fitting for the moment you're narrating. It can also be the complete opposite of what you are visually showing, but still, as a commentary, you know, it has to have an emotional impact, whether direct or indirect with what you're showing. But then at the same time, this this piece also has to speak on an intellectual level. Why are you using that piece specifically? Why? What is the history of this piece, both in terms of composition as well as in terms of fruition and performance history? And based on that, I think you should make your choices. And that's what I did with the Little Broomstick Rider, because most of the music is actually made of pieces that are from the era the story is set into. So it's all German music from early 17th century. But some of it, on the other hand, is music that comes from almost a century later. I use some litanies by the great Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, who, as we all know, is one of the fathers of music. And he's historically is placed much later, at the beginning of the 18th century. But some of the pieces that I chose, the text were based on 17th century's litanies. So the link was always there. And of course, speaking again of wicked humor and wicked choices, there is a reason why I decided to use some very heavy, religious, serious music as a commentary to some of the episodes, because of course, religion, or not necessarily religion, because I have nothing against religions of any kind. What I'm against is the use that is made by some people and some powers of religion. And that's another very important theme in the series. And of course, the use of liturgic, sacred music in some episodes helped me suggest this gloomy hysteria that led to witch hunts at the time. Because let's not forget that it's around the same time that the Salem witch hunts happened in America.
Yes, of course. Yes, absolutely. I mean,
but in that case, it was the Puritans. Here, it was the Catholics in Germany who, because of the general revolutionary upheaval, even of religion, and of course, Germany was becoming more and more largely Protestant. So it was a way for the Catholic side to try to, keep power as much as they could, of course, in the most horrible ways.
Well, yeah, no, exactly. And I wonder as well, when you're doing a project like this, it kind of takes you on a whole other journey of research, really. And, you know, you obviously are somebody that wants to present a lot of facts and historical accuracy,
yes.
to make your storytelling all the more authentic.
Yes, it's true. And I love to do lots of research for my works, always. In this case, I have to say it did happen, although the story that I was basing myself upon was so rich and extraordinary to me that I instantly actually started working on it. And the interesting thing is that the research came parallelly to my production development, so to speak. And that's very interesting because I found out, first of all, when I said earlier that we don't really have much much critical writings about this specific collection of Bechstein witch tales, I also refer to the fact that I was not able to trace some of the direct inspirations that he had. But I found some elements that are very, very interesting about the witch trials that did happen in Bavaria during those years. Because, of course, Bechstein sets the story in a specific time frame, which I took again. And of course, as you can also see from the architecture behind, there was definitely a study, although everything is warped through a sort of fairy tale-ish lens. But still, the architecture is in a way pretty accurate, as you can see.
Honestly, it's so, there's a simplicity, yet there's so much detail there.
Yes, and the thing is that when it comes to the historical background, I found out that where these atrocious witch trials that lasted for many years and costed so many lives to so many innocent people in the early 17th century in both Bamberg and Würzburg, which are Bavarian towns in Germany. And from the information that I gathered, many people that were killed were small children. And yes, there are still the how can I say that? There's still some documents of the period saying, revealing the names of the people and sometimes their age or their characteristics. And there's a long list of these names. And on one of those trials that ended so horribly, there were some names, and attached to one name, there was the description, the most beautiful girl in the village, which sends you a chill through your spine because you understand probably why she was, accused and then tried and then executed. Because let's not forget that witch trials, whenever they happen, then in the end, they always get out of control. That's one of their main characteristics. So even the people that started them, most of the time find themselves, being accused, because it then becomes a very perverse, never-ending death game. Yeah. But within this specific list, an even more chilling detail I have to reveal, which is there were two names of children, and one of them was, the description was 9 years of age. And then the following one was the name, and then even less. And by even less, they meant even younger than 9. So, as if those who had tried them in the end had some sort, may I say, hypocritical shame, to the point that they couldn't even reveal the actual age of this child, who was even younger than 9. But these children were actually tried and executed for witchcraft. Of course, we're talking about a time in history where the care and tutelage of children was non-existent. That is a very recent historic creation, actually. The care and attention for children in childhood is something that really started in the late 19th century, early 20th century, especially in Britain, for example, at the very beginning. But it's a very recent thing in history. There was not this kind of care back in that day, which also makes even more interesting the way that, for example, in the series, the inquisitors treat the child and keep accusing him and trying to play psychological games with him. But yes, reading those stories and those historic details was very interesting for me, because I cannot base myself on facts, but the idea of having those little children being tried and executed is something that made me think maybe Bechstein knew those details and decided to create this story in a way to avenge those poor children. Because let's face it, I mean, I have to speak as a director and also as a dramaturg in this sense, because of course I adapted this story and made it my own. Little Linhard, who is of course the little protagonist of the series, is possibly one of the most interesting characters I've come across. And it's been a pleasure dealing with him. Oh, by the way, may I show my t-shirt?
Oh, that's lovely.
Here he is with me during this interview. So yeah, he's definitely been one of the most interesting characters I've been dealing with. And I'm already plotting, that's the right term, a second season.
I was going to ask if there was going to be, if he was sort of put in the drawer away and you've kind of done what you want to. I'm so glad to see that you are going to do something else with the character.
I mean, a wide audience still needs to see the series, of course, because at the moment it's just playing at festivals. But yeah, a second one is definitely
on the cards, on the paper.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Well, I was going to ask you, and obviously now that the films or the series is finished, it's now doing a festival tour. Can you tell us a little bit more about where it's been and where it's going to be, where people can see it?
Well, considering the project that it is, it has had a very amazing life. I know you're not supposed to say grammatically very amazing, but in this specific case, it does work. Let's defy grammar for a second. It really was amazing. And because first of all, it had its world premiere at Slamdance, the legendary Slamdance Film Festival. And not only it had its world premiere there, but it won the audience award there, which was, super thrilling. It was amazing for me. And then, but the interesting thing is that Slamdance, for the episodic section, was showing just one episode per series. And in my specific case, they decided to show episode 4, which again, I don't want to give too much away. We've in a way already spoken about this specific episode, but it's also an episode that might work as a standalone. So it was, and it's a bit different from the rest. So it was, it was a great choice, I think, on their part. But I'm saying that because now, the Little Broomstick Rider is about to have its UK premiere. And I'm super thrilled about it because it's going to be at a magnificent place that you know very well, which is the London FrightFest, which, as we know, is one of the most important genre film festivals in the world. And they're also quite notorious for making very specific choices. I mean, they're quite demanding in their taste, as they should be. And I was so honored, again, yet another legendary festival. And I was so honored by the selection because, as far as I know, they don't really deal with series, but they liked mine. And they suggested to show each episode at the beginning of every night before the features.
Fantastic.
Which for me is such a huge honor. And they're going to showcase episodes 1 and 2 on opening night, and then 1 episode per night afterwards. So I'm super, super excited. And it's going to happen very, very soon.
It is next week, I think.
London crowd, don't miss the Little Broomstick Rider.
Don't miss that at all. And I suppose to kind of round the interview off, what have you sort of taken away with you, from making this? What have you learned about yourself as a filmmaker, and maybe what advice would you give anybody else wanting to kind of do the same thing, really, and try?
Oh, this is a magnificent question. Thank you so much. This is really a great question.
Oh,
thank you. May I just finish the previous subject? Because there's yet another festival coming in October. that's yet another one I can already speak about, and it's Terrible Fest, which happens in New York, and it's the main festival in the US about independent TV and web series. And I just discovered that it's just one of the 35 projects that they selected worldwide, and it's the only Italian project also. So I'm very interested. I'm very happy, even though the series is Italian because I'm Italian, but it's actually spoken, if we can use this expression, yeah, related to this very specific series, but it's spoken or at least written in English. But yes, so that's yet another amazing news for the near future for this series. Sorry, now back to your excellent question. What I learned a lot, because I learned to have much more creative faith in myself, because as I told you, I posed myself this challenge early on, trying to understand if something cinematic could be done on one's own. And the great lesson that I learned, at least for myself, is yes, that I could do that. And I have to say that creatively, also on a psychological level of creativity, is something very important, at least for me, knowing that from now on, I have created a specific style of my own, which audiences seem to love, and that eventually will allow me to create something entirely on my own. It will take a while, but it's refreshing. It's great because now I know that I can make cinema entirely on my own. But that's an interesting thing because it's a result of a very long process of thoughts and also intellectual process in a way. Because as always, when you don't have resources and you work on a shoestring budget, if there is a budget, exactly, you always have to think of what you have and what you don't have in order to create. You cannot just create freely and then try to find things. That of course is a way of dealing with stuff. But when you know that you're going to create in a state of complete misery, at least economically, you must start from what you don't have and what you cannot afford in order to create something. And that was my initial thought, also because I'm fully aware that, as we already said, filmmaking is a collaborative effort. It's a group effort. So most of the times when you deal with it on your own, let's face it, horrible stuff is likely going to come out. So you must be very aware of what your skills are, and at some point DIY will inevitably show on the screen. So you must be aware of it, prepared for it, and embrace it, which is what I did. For example, I had some illustrations where you have ink smears or the paper is not cut out properly. And I decided to keep those things because it all added to the underdog nature of the project, which is not just an underdog project. It was telling the story of an underdog. The themes were largely related to being underdogs and dealing with the underdog life and philosophy of life. So showing it also from an aesthetic point of view was, to me, very important. I kept all of the imperfections. And the FrightFest audience is definitely going to see it because apparently they're going to be showcased on an IMAX screen. And that to me is amazing because something I did entirely on my own, on my desk from home, simply cutting out paper, using pencils and pens and scissors and glue and tape. Seeing it on an IMAX screen is is pure poetry.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And wicked humor once more.
Yeah. And it kind of, for me, just seeing those imperfections of the cutouts just made it feel much more kind of tactile and real.
Thank you.
And kind of relatable. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I do. That's great.
There's something about that. It just, the simplicity of that just made it feel like, it makes you feel like you want to go out and do it.
Awesome.
I
mean, if that is the feeling, I'm so happy, because I understood, at least thanks to some of my skills, I could do cinema of a certain type, of course, on my own. And it was a real joy for me, because at some point when I was doing it, of course, I was thinking of an audience. I always do think of an audience, but at the same time, while I was doing it, considering also the situation, the global situation we were in at the time, I understood early on that I was also doing it for me. So there wasn't really any pressure. It was the pleasure of making cinema, that even when you deal with projects that you love and you truly believe into, you don't necessarily have this kind of feeling. But solitude was not bad in this case. I love being with my crew and my cast. I do love it. Don't get me wrong. But also this situation of creative solitude was interesting, if not very refreshing, because it was entirely free. And I dealt with freedom with this series down to a T, literally. Also because the 6 episodes, they all have very, very different length from one another. And I deliberately did that because I really wanted to underline the anarchic spirit of the narrative. I wanted it to be reflected also in the structure of the series, and there you go. But yeah, what you said really touched me. Thank you very much. If that can give people the inspiration to go and try produce something cool on their own cinematically, then I think I won the lottery as a filmmaker with this artistic endeavor. Definitely.
Well, you definitely have, Matteo, and thank you so much, because it's such an enchanting story. I loved it, and I'm gushing about your brilliance, because you truly are brilliant. And
You're far too kind, but thank you. And coming from you, it's a huge compliment. Thanks. And I have one question. Yeah. Which is your favorite episode?
Oh, now that is a good question. Which is my favorite episode? Oh, I think it's definitely the last one.
Oh.
Yeah. Because I really liked what the story culminated to, and how, I can't say too much, obviously, but I thought that the twist at the end, and the kind of the meaning and the way you illustrated all of that it just made the whole journey of watching it completely worthwhile, because it was just perfect. So I think I liked all of them, because you wanted to kind of find what's going on, and more and more, and you instantly kind of connect to the little 9-year-old. But I think I really liked because I thought it was just a clever ending.
Thank you so much.
And so unexpected. That's but so in keeping with what you were trying to tell, and it was fantastic.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that you liked it, because as I said, I changed the ending completely, and I'm really, really glad that those are your feelings about it.
Yeah, no, it definitely worked. I sat there and I just thought, this is just genius. I mean, that's, and I said that to Anthony as we sat and watched it. So it's been a thrill, and thank you for, spending your time to talk to me about it. And I really wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Claire. It was a real pleasure talking to you, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you so, so much. And all the best with everything.
Thank you very much. And you, Matteo.